something like that. Kind of explain that they could do just the occupancy side of the building, the east side, with that number. But then I know you guys were looking at maybe trying to do the whole building. So if we do the whole building, there's no way we can get enough water from Montezuma Water Company to make that happen. So I did reach out to Irique after we had our talk last week. He kind of gave me this little rundown on what it would take to basically meet the code of NFPA 13. And basically what we'd have to do is put in a water storage tank with a pump that would give us enough pressure and flow to our suppression system. With that, you know, there's quite a bit of cost because then we're having to redesign the whole system inside. And then we have to hook directly into a power line for power. He did kind of give me some cost estimations. Those are blanked out on this just in case we have to, in case we want to do this and put it out for bid or something. But that's kind of the rundown. I mean, if you kind of look through that, you'll kind of get an idea what he says that we have to have in order to meet those requirements on doing the whole building. If we want to do the arena plus the east part. I believe he also stated in this little thing, if we want to do that whole building, their bid would cover doing the east side, getting it completed, plus removing everything out of the arena part. But that bid would not cover, you know, a tank, a pump, and then installing new suppression lines in the arena part.
All right, so I guess his 20,000 gallon tank is based on the fire flow for the entire building?
Correct.
Is that where that's coming from?
Yeah, that comes into their engineering as far as how much would be required to supply that building at X amount of minutes. And I'm not sure those numbers, but
Basically, if you're furthest away from the pump, you have to supply a certain amount of flow for a certain amount of time. And that's how you determine what size tank you need.
All right, I know we haven't had a lot of time to sit and read this because
yeah.
obviously to digest this, but I mean, the biggest load out there, or the potentially biggest load, is the gun show, right?
Yeah.
That's a lot of ammunition, that's a lot of fire load.
Now, obviously, keep in mind, they do keep people on staff inside that building 24/7.
So that almost could act as an actual fire, what do they call that, Kent?
Mitigation?
Well, yeah, because there's a, if you have somebody on
Fire watch.
Fire watch.
So
It
sheriff's
actually-
posse, they hire sheriff's posse to go in there, or they may do it for free, I don't know, but they go in. They have 2 or 3 that sit in there all night long, because, you know, there's lots of money sitting there, so they do have somebody there 24/7 inside that building.
So for a fire watch, we can call that a fire watch. What about the other big shows?
The other shows we don't. I mean, they might have somebody that's camped outside during their shows, you know, so somebody's on the grounds, you know, but it's gonna be hard to know if something's happening inside the building if you're just on the grounds in an RV.
So is that something that we could require that they have a fire watch for those? I mean, really, we're talking about the ag show, the gun show,
Home garden,
home and garden show.
fair.
And the fair. And we have our own personnel that we can take care of fire watch through the fair, correct?
Well, I don't know that I or any of our guys can do it that work there. I mean, cause now you're asking us to stay out there 24/7 inside the building and
Well, it would rotate. There only has to be one person for a fire watch. I mean, you add another 350 to 750,000, if I read that right?
Yep, that is correct.
Just for a 20,000 gallon tank and a pump?
Yep. Well, plus you're gonna have to look at engineering plans to hook directly to a high line, you know, and then that's something that's gonna have to be cooperated with Empire Electric, because basically they don't want this pump to be sitting on our side of the meter. They want it direct. If it has to be used, it's used till it burns up. And they want direct power added at all times. So that's one thing to keep in mind on that.
Realistically, if we don't do the arena area, they can do it with the fire flow that they have currently at the 500 GPM,
Yes,
which would eliminate everything in the arena.
yes. So he had a plan where they could go in there and do that whole eastern side of the building where the kitchen and the offices and the meeting rooms are. And then us have Montezuma water supply us enough water for that. And then we'd be getting a dedicated line and meter for Montezuma water in that scenario.
Correct.
Yep.
But then that takes care of the real fire load on a daily basis.
Correct.
The arena is not,
No, it's just a weekend
It's
thing here
just-
and there. Yep,
and it's not a huge fire load unless those shows are in there.
correct.
Did they consider standpipes in this at all? Running accessible pipes with hose reels down to, on some of our girders?
I don't know. I don't know if that would meet their codes or not either. Cause I know that's kinda how they were working it, was to the code, so. I'm not
I
sure.
doubt it.
Probably
Couldn't
not.
answer that.
Yeah, I would doubt it. Okay. Questions?
Yeah. Is there any possibility of grant money being out there?
Well, I don't know.
I don't know either. That's,
Have you talked to Nicole?
Not for this specifically. I know we've kind of been talking about grants for other projects, but I don't know that any of them will cover something
That's
of this nature,
Suppression.
yeah.
yeah.
I'd have to reach back out to her, but I'm sure there's nothing available at the
Here's the way I
moment.
look at it, and this is gonna be a legal question for Ian. If the gun show is probably the biggest fire load because of the ammunition and the powder, whatever they're carrying in there. But if they already have a fire watch anyway for those 2 days, 3 days, whatever that is, I think that pretty well covers us through the fire code, because you can do that in motels, you can do it in schools. But if we eliminate the other part of it, does it really open us, I mean, for liability with those other two shows, or is that something that we could just, in our contract, say that you do have to have, a fire watch for those?
I mean, the real question in a case like that, say something were to happen and a fire were to break out and people were to get hurt. I mean, the real question that that the court would look at is whether we exercised reasonable care in putting in a system that was going to be suitable to protect the public. And so, you know, is it reasonable for a county to have a huge fire suppression system at an event like that? I mean, that's really the question that you're looking at. I could certainly, you know, do some research and look and see if this question's come up in the courts, but generally it's a standard of care. And so, you know, I think there's an argument to be made that it probably would be reasonable to have some kind of a fire suppression system in a building that's going to be hosting the kind of shows that we host there. Now, the extent to which I mean, what sort of system might be reasonable? I mean, that's all gonna be dependent on facts. But, you know, I mean, you look at something like the gun show, and I mean, I think you spoke about it, Commissioner. We're talking about a lot of ammunition, a lot of stuff that could go up. I mean, understanding that we're gonna be hosting that sort of an event there, well, what kind of precautions are gonna be reasonable? And that's the sort of thing that a court's gonna look at in this sort of circumstance. So, you know, that's not a definite answer, but I mean, that's the standard the
Sure.
court's gonna apply.
Sure, because the other two shows probably don't have near the, well, I know they don't. They're,
No, they're not
There's
gonna
not.
have anything like that. I mean, there may be stuff in there that could certainly, I guess, combust per se,
Sure.
you know, if it but nothing to that
sure, there's
magnitude.
nothing that's,
You know, a lot of it's gonna be curtains and things like that that are gonna go up if,
Well, they've got,
Well-
you know.
you know, you've got lawnmowers, machinery, and they've got fuel and oil in them.
Exactly,
But that's nothing like
but
it.
that's
Well-
really confined to,
Right.
it's not going to spread like powder. It's not as volatile, it's not.
Well, and you can certainly mitigate risk by putting up, say, evacuation plans in visible places and, you know, giving people clear instructions on how to get out. I mean, clear exit signs. I mean, all that stuff's gonna play into it. Again, I mean, if a fire happens out there and something happens, you know, there's always gonna be liability. But, I mean, at the same time, you do what you can to make sure that if something were to happen, that folks can get out and get safe. You know, Justin, I don't know, I mean, I would imagine there's a lot of fairgrounds around the state, similar to ours, that don't have full-blown fire suppression systems. I don't know that for sure, but, I mean, that would be my assumption.
Yeah, and I'm not sure. I'd have to reach out
And
to
that would
some
be,
of
that would
those.
be something interesting to look at too, because, I mean, if you're talking about what's reasonable, well,
So I guess, yeah, and that's kind of where I'm headed, because what was bid out was to change the suppression system over the arena because of the distance of the heads, correct?
So what was bid out was to make what we have meet code. Okay, now with doing that and meeting code, we have to have X amount of water to make that
Right.
work legally.
Right,
That's where
Which-
our issue ran into.
which then comes into that liability question, we don't have the water. Well, if you don't have the water, the suppression system has to be built for the water that we have. So, I guess,
these are tricky scenarios.
I
I mean,
know.
because there's a lot that plays into it. And I mean, the bottom line is, you know, if something happens, then it does come down to a factual analysis, what's reasonable, what's not. And, you know, I mean, I think that there's an argument that could be made, hey, you can't get the water, so if you can't get the water, obviously you can't have a system. But then we can get the water. It's just gonna cost a lot of money. And so what's reasonable, you know, these are tough calls.
yeah, what's gonna be reasonable? Well,
Exactly.
you could have gotten the water,
Yep.
but,
I mean, listen, you know, the very best case scenario is to get a fire suppression system in there that's up to code. If you have a fire suppression system that's up to code, then you've got no issue.
that seems awful
But that's a,
shallow, doesn't it,
Yes.
500 GPM?
It does.
I thought they put a brand new line out there, I'm struggling, 500 gallons a minute is not a lot of water.
No, it doesn't seem like, but they're only running at 60 residual too, and we'd have to have 100. So, you know, it's quite a bit less PSI than what we
And
would
100
need.
100 residual is,
That's pretty high,
that's a lot.
Mhm.
that's super high.
So that'd be the other issue we were running into if they were able to give us the gallon per minute, is whether or not we could have the pressure behind it. So, and that all comes back to, like Dustin was saying, they have to take the furthest corner of the building,
Mhm.
like a 25 by 25 footprint of that section, and that's what they have to use to come up with all their numbers. In reality, is that ever gonna happen? Probably not. You'll probably only have a few sprinklers go off, and we have enough water the way it is for that. But that doesn't meet any of our codes, and they're obviously not gonna go work on that unless they're meeting, you know,
Sure. Let me
something.
ask you
So-
another question. Do we have a security system out there that goes right straight to dispatch?
No. And that was something we were kind of discussing a little bit with this, if we got this fixed, to put an alarm on there.
Well,
of
because
something
with
that
the
would kinda do
suppression
that.
system, we're supposed to have an alarm system.
Yeah.
So, one,
And the panel's in there,
they
But
have,
nothing
they work
works.
together, because if a head starts going off, if you start getting flow, it contacts the dispatch immediately, which sends the fire department before you start getting a lot of heads flowing. So,
It could just end up being water damage with, a single head flowing without anybody around. You can dump a lot of water in a spot and do a lot of damage.
let me, I've got a meeting in Dolores tonight anyway, so
Yeah,
I'll talk to
talk to Dave.
the biggest fire marshal that I know around, or that has been, that I've worked with for several years, and kind of get an opinion, because I think a fire watch specifically for the gun show, if they already have one, that's the biggest load.
I would think so.
The other two, we could restrict curtains. I mean, they don't have to have curtains, the other shows don't have them.
Yeah, I mean, if we had to do things like
Well,
that,
I'm just,
we could.
this is an open conversation, we're just thinking about how do we mitigate, and sometimes we just take something away, it doesn't hurt the show at all.
Yeah,
We do,
It just,
we have, an opinion from our insurance guy that we're okay. The fire guys here say that this will bring us up to code if we do this and this and this. So we're getting there, but slowly.
yeah, I believe the insurance was more concerned on the exterior part and whether or not you had, you
Yeah.
know.
Defensible space.
Exactly, defensible space around your building X amount. So I think that was kind of their realm. As far as the interior of the building, I don't think
Yeah.
they were so concerned about.
yeah, but the interior of the building, because the suppression system is already there, that's
Yes,
where the issue comes into play,
Yes.
because
Right.
people walk in, they're like, yeah, you got a suppression system, we're good to go.
Yep.
Well, we're, it's,
Which
we're
is
kind of
something.
advertising falsely
I-
that that suppression system is good to go.
I don't know that that's as big of a deal, though. I mean, I don't know the fact that we have a suppression system that people see is gonna be the do-all, end-all. I mean, this is more about what's reasonable in terms of
Yeah.
suppressing a fire, not advertising. I mean, there's a certain assumption of risk whenever anybody goes to something like this, but, I mean, it's really what's reasonable from the county's perspective, as I said before. So, I'm not as concerned that there's a fire suppression system in there that people see as I am, is it reasonable to have a fire suppression system? I mean, I think a lot of it depends on, well, if you're gonna have a gun show, I mean, that probably jacks up the reasonability of having something like that, a fire suppression system. You know what I'm saying? Like, if you've got a bunch of flammable stuff in there, and you've got a bunch of people in there, well, I mean, then you're kind of looking at a different calculus,
Right, yeah. if
because
you
your
get
fire risk goes up.
That does go, that is flammable. It's all combustible, but that's gonna be flammable. Okay.
and I
I
know,
mean,
like,
this is reaching, but we could ask that every exhibitor who wants a booth, bring a fire extinguisher with them.
I mean, we have them in the building, so if
Yeah.
you were to
Then
see
you'd have to
something.
know how to use it.
Well, you're halfway there,
I mean, I think at the very least, what we need to be sure of is that we have really clear direction out there. In the case of a fire, this is what you do.
Yeah, and
And you have your exits clearly marked, and you are sure that people can get out those doors. I mean, I don't know how all the doors lock out there. My recollection is most of them you just
yes,
push.
you just push open, they
They
got
all
crash
have-
bars.
But that's something that we have to do regardless.
Exactly.
Be sure we're in line with that stuff.
And pretty sure all of those
Yeah.
are.
So-
Every exit is marked.
Yeah, we have that, all our exits are marked, they got, signs up there that say exit, et cetera. They all have crash bars on, if you're inside, you can easily
Yep.
hit that and go right out. We don't have things hanging that, say, go to this area or anything like that. I don't know if that would help us or
It
not.
might not be a bad idea. I mean, it's not gonna hurt. I would get with the fire chief or somebody in the know and figure out, I mean, because I obviously don't know crafting evacuation plans. I don't know how all that works, but none of that's gonna hurt. If you can get that stuff up there, I mean, that's just another thing that you have up there, that could be helpful.
That's the biggest show we have, isn't it?
Yeah, I think so.
Or the most
For the
flammable.
most part, well,
Yeah, one with the most exposure, I would think.
Because taking down the curtains on the other ones is not a big deal. That's just a combustible
Mhm.
material. It's not
Yeah.
necessarily flammable. Okay. All right. I'll have a conversation with the fire marshal tonight
okay.
and see where we go, but that 500 GPM really is all they can, that just
What Steve, Roman told me.
just seems very little.
He said about the, I believe he said it was 8-inch line down there. Because we were asking for 6 at one point, and they wanted to know why we needed a 6. But then we got Cooper to kind of give us some actual numbers then, because we knew the 4-inch. Since they do that fire stuff all the time, they pretty well knew that the 4-inch wasn't gonna be sufficient.
Right, which we had that conversation too. We knew that that was not, it's typically nothing less than a 6. And
Now, also to
sometimes
just
we
kind of
don't.
keep in mind when they did these engineered plans or whatever, and they came up with the plan of just meeting code and then needing X amount of water, it was way higher than that 1,000 gallon per minute at 100 PSI. That 1,000 gallon per minute at 100 PSI is if they go in there and adjust a little bit more. So they'd have to change some of our current stuff, which would change technically the bid, because the bid was on one thing, and then, so just kind of keep that in the back of our heads. If for some reason Montezuma Water was to give us that 500 or that 1,000 at 100, we could then therefore change the building to accommodate it. But it would not be the exact same price of that, that they bid already. It would add a little bit more, because they'd have to do a little bit more work to get there. I believe what they were saying is they'd be able to use all our existing main lines in that scenario, but they would have to change all our branch lines to 2-inch. Right now, it's got a schedule system in there, so it goes from our main lines down to like 2-inch, down to 1-inch, et cetera, et cetera. So if they did that, they'd have to change it all to 2-inch.
They need more volume.
Yep, and then add sprinkler heads and stuff, so it would add a little bit of cost if we could get that water. But that's been our problem, so. Can't get the water, the only other solution is the tank, which he kind of laid out in this, so. Kind of where we're at.
Okay. Question?
No, just
Okay.
start running scenarios through your mind.
No, I know, I just. Yeah,
Would our tank freeze, would,
well, it'd have to be a
It
buried,
has to be heated.
yeah.
buried, yeah, I don't know. It's-
That's why it
Then
costs so
how-
much to
you
put a
know,
tank
you'd
in.
have to still tap into Montezuma water to fill it,
So in that
Mhm.
scenario, we could just fill off of one of our existing lines.
yeah.
And then.
Right,
And,
and,
yep, and then you just have to have X amount of water sitting there that would, I believe it's 30 minutes runtime is what it has to do, which gives enough time for local authorities or whatever to get out there.
right, so the
Yeah.
20,000 gallons is figured enough to suppress the fire prior to anybody showing up.
Exactly, for X amount of time. And I want to say 30 minutes off the top of my head.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
Yeah, so,
Okay. Nothing else? How, just kinda at the fairgrounds, a different subject, how are we doing on the
Pad. Wash rack.
wash rack?
Built that fence tunnel this morning, that's why I missed that meeting, I forgot all about that meeting. Anyway, that's still in there. Getting ready to
yeah, so we got the hole kind of dug out. Here in the next day or two, we're going to look at putting gravel in it. And then hopefully the end of the week, we can have a slab poured. But we're still waiting on a dry well. Yeah, it's on order, so as soon as we get it, we can poke it in the ground next to it.
the water line side of it should be here.
So you might make it by fair time. You'll make it by fair. What is it, the end of
End of
July?
July, yeah, starts at
2 weeks,
29th,
3 weeks?
concert.
The only thing that's.
Sales the 6th, yeah, 6th.
What-
It's 2 to 3 weeks out, so, but I ordered it last week.
Yeah, we should have it all done, but the dry well in maybe,
Yeah.
that's gonna be which I guess technically they could use it if they wanted to without the dry well. It's just gonna pile a bunch of water up.
It's just,
Yeah,
I mean, there is somewhat of a drain there, but it'd be a lot nicer if that well was in,
yeah.
so.
Otherwise, you just have an open hole,
Yeah.
which is not a good
Well, we're
thing
not
for-
gonna dig that hole till we get
Right.
our well, so, cause I don't want an open hole sitting there for
Right.
fair, but yes,
Right. You'll just have the concrete slab and the
exactly,
tie, wash,
Yeah.
whatever. Okay,
exactly.
all right, well, hopefully you get in, because that's not gonna take you long to dig a hole and
No, I won't take
set it.
long,
It's quick and easy.
Yep.
Alright, okay,
so.
all right, thank you, gentlemen.
Justin, as long as I have you here, I
Yes,
got
sir.
that MOU earlier. When do you need that back by?
They'd like it as soon as possible.
Okay.
Just so they could kinda, get on board as far as,
Yep,
making sure that we're,
absolutely. Okay.
in agreement with it, and then they can start
So
their
is this something you
process.
need tomorrow or the
I
following
mean,
week?
A week,
Okay,
that's fine.
okay.
Like, if you wanna wait,
We'll put it on next week's agenda, and then
That'll work.
if you want to come in for that, we can
I can do
get
that.
it looked at.
Don't
Okay,
let me stop
sounds
it,
good.
And then
Yeah.
we can get everything
Yep.
buttoned up before then.
Yep.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, and next we have, the legislative proposal that's, getting ready to start at CCI this Friday. And we have a letter from, La Plata County.
Yeah, and so this is a letter that I received from the La Plata County attorney. Basically, La Plata County is planning to go to CCI. They're planning to submit this proposal for new legislation that would, in essence, create a state insurance pool fund to fix these landfills that are closed. Basically, what happened is there's 187 closed landfills in Colorado. La Plata County's been dealing with a lot of issues there with one of their closed landfills because there's some contamination of the groundwater. So they've been involved in litigation with CDPHE for quite some time now, trying to deal with this. CDPHE is, in essence, pushing off a lot of these cleanup duties on the counties, saying they have to meet certain standards. La Plata County's position is, hey, some of these landfills were closed even before the legislation came in. And so we want to amend this legislation to grandfather in those old landfills and then create a state fund that's going to help offset some of the costs or cover some of the costs associated with the cleanup. Basically, what La Plata County is asking for is a letter of support or Montezuma County support at the CCI meeting as they introduce this for CCI's consideration to forward as proposed legislation. I don't know if you guys have any questions. I mean, I think, quite frankly, I think it's a no-brainer. This is a way that the state can help pay for some of these regulations that they're imposing on the landfills, and so it seems to me like it's a great idea, but I wanted to put that before you guys today, just to get it on your radar, and so we can be in contact with La Plata County in the upcoming weeks and let them know where we stand.
And I would agree with Ian, after reading this, and I'll obviously hear it on Friday's CCI call to see what the other counties think about it as far as proposed legislation, but I did have Marcia Norton reach out to me, and she would like to get on our agenda for the 18th, if that's possible, and our workshop, and come over and just give us a little bit of information more to this as their position in La Plata County. And I think that would be well worth listening to them. But I agree with Ian, it seems like
this is too easy.
one of the issues that we deal with all the time down there at the landfill is CDPHE.
Right.
And all of the restrictions. I understand nobody wants contaminated groundwater, I get that. But if you can prove it with these wells that are being drilled, that it should not be it should be able to be done and get over
Right.
with, so. I don't, I'll bring back whatever the conversation with all 64 counties is after the call on Friday, because it starts at 8:30 and usually goes till noon. I have no issues with this myself.
No.
Cheryl? Nothing? Okay. All right. That's all.
It's all on the
So-
list.
Okay. Well then, seeing that, we will close this workshop. Thank you all.